Hi, this is Frank Maloney and you're watching Lights Out.
This is Lights Out. I am Faisal Khan and welcome to episode 1 of the Lights Out Boxing Podcast. And I'm delighted to be joined by Usman Mahmood, Mr. AKA HF.
Yes, pleasure to be here representing Lights Out.
Always a pleasure to have you on, HF. Before we get started, just wanted to let the viewers out there know, if they haven't already, please make sure they subscribe to the channel. And to keep up to date with us on social media, all the links for our social media platforms are in the description. We do have a Twitter page, an Instagram and a Facebook page. So yeah, make sure you're following us on all 3 of those social media platforms. Before we get started with the podcast, just want to talk about a few brief points of the weekend's boxing action. We saw Josh Taylor and the Monster Inoue move on to the World Boxing Super Series finals. Josh Taylor becoming a new world champion. Joe Saunders became a 2-weight world champion after defeating Shafat Asufi on points in Stevenage at the Lennox Stadium. And Deontay Wilder with another astonishing and devastating knockout over Dominic Breazeale in the first round. Now, the reason why I just want to speak a bit about Deontay Wilder's knockout over Dominic Breazeale is because the main point we're going to be discussing today is going to be the heavyweight division, and that's obviously on today's topic. Now, after Deontay Wilder stopped Dominic Breazeale, Jim Gray interviewed Deontay Wilder for Showtime, and he said something and it got me thinking that's our first topic that we're going to discuss on episode 1. Jim Gray asked Deontay Wilder about the fights with Anthony Joshua and a potential rematch with Tyson Fury, but he mentioned a fight with Riddick Bowe and Lennox Lewis, 2 former undisputed heavyweight champions. Never happened in the professional side of boxing. Now, for those of you who don't know, Riddick Bowe was a former undisputed heavyweight champion. He retired with a record of 45 wins and 1 defeat. 33 of those wins coming by way of knockout. Lennox Lewis, a former undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, a 2-time lineal heavyweight champion of the world. He retired with a record of 41 wins, 2 draws, 1 defeat. 32 of those wins coming by knockout.
2 defeats.
Two defeats.
Yeah, he lost to Oliver McCall and he got knocked out by Hasim the Rock.
Hasim Rahman, my mistake. Yes, well pointed
back
out.
in the jungle.
Yes, it was, and then obviously he
avenged that defeat.
Exactly. Yeah. Riddick Bowe was a former silver medalist at the Olympic Games in 1988, and he lost in the final to
Lennox Lewis.
Yes. Riddick Bowe beat some very good fighters. He beat Evander Holyfield twice, Michael Dokes, Herbie Hyde. Lennox Lewis's record speaks for itself. He beat Evander Holyfield, beat Vitaly Klitschko, Frank Bruno, and of course Mike Tyson. Now, HF.
Yeah.
Let's talk a bit about Bowe and Lewis. Start with Bowe. What type of a fighter was he? And, what sort of legacy has he cemented in boxing?
Well, a lot of the experts at the time of when Bowe won the title put it this way. He challenged Evander Holyfield in 1992 for the Undisputed Championship of the World. Evander Holyfield was the champ at the time, but going into the fight, as a challenger, Riddick Bowe was actually the favourite going into the fight, which you don't see very often. I don't know how many times in history you've seen that. Maybe Mike Tyson when he fought Berbick. But yeah, that was the talent of the man, because he was silver medalist in the Olympics. He had pedigree going into the fight. He's the size of the man. He's almost like twice the size of Holyfield himself, who was moving up from cruiserweight. He had the great jab. He was trained by a legend trainer. What's his name again? Eddie Futch. Eddie Futch had trained him. Same guy who trained George Foreman for, I think, the Rumble in the Jungle.
Yeah.
The only thing lacking in Bowe's part was his discipline. He had tendencies to overindulge in...
Get involved in scraps.
No, overindulge in food and being out of shape outside of fights, outside of training camps. So that was something that they had to carefully manage. But he was in shape for the Holyfield fight, and he done awesome, and then obviously round 10 was one of the best fights in heavyweight history. And I think Teddy Atlas also said it during the fight. As a commentator, it was one of the greatest fights in history. So he won that title in the 1992. And then the issues came with trying to secure a fight with Lennox Lewis.
Lennox Lewis at the time, was coming up as well. Obviously, he was a gold medalist winner at the 1988 Olympics. Talk to me about Lewis. Not only at that time, but in his career. Give the viewers a bit of a insight of what Lewis left behind in boxing.
Lewis was a strange one, because he was born in the UK.
Representing Canada at the Olympics.
He represented Canada. He learned his boxing in Canada. That's where he grew up. but then he also had part of that Jamaican flag in his shorts. So it was like a he never really, no one really
knew what sort of country he was
yeah,
representing.
yeah, like his heart wasn't set in a certain place. I think when he turned professional, he fought out of the UK because that's where the money was. And obviously fighting for Frank Maloney and his promoter. He's a bit savvy in that part. But the UK public never took to him because they always preferred Frank Bruno over him. So he felt like an outsider. Obviously, he went on to defeat Frank Bruno as well. But that's like 1993. But Lewis is a good fighter. He was fast. He sparred with Mike Tyson in the not in the amateurs. He done general sparring with Mike Tyson whilst they were amateurs. And Customato said at the time when they were both 16 that these guys are going to fight for a major fight with the pros.
Yeah.
And that happened, but obviously it wasn't at the time they should have fought. Obviously, Tyson was almost finished by the time Lewis was established as a fighter.
And I think one thing you have to really appreciate about Lennox Lewis, and that's obviously taking nothing away from Riddick Bowe, you know, he fought great fighters. You know, he fought Evander Holyfield twice. He fought Frank Bruno. You know, Oliver McCall, Glenn McCrory, and of course Mike Tyson. You know,
he dominated his era without a doubt. He beat Tommy Morrison. He beat Shannon Briggs. He beat Michael Grant, who was also who was hyped up to be the next big American fighter. He got knocked out in 2 rounds. Turns out he had glass chin. His record speaks for itself.
Now, obviously, these two didn't meet in the professional side of the boxing business, but they met in the amateurs in the 1988 Super Heavyweight Olympic Finals in Seoul, Korea. Lewis won by TKO in round 2. HF, just, you know, talk to me a bit about that fight. You've seen it quite a few times. Some people say it was a controversial decision. What was your take on it?
Well, I don't think it's a controversial decision. I mean, people must realize in the amateurs, any clean shot that you take, a referee is actually allowed to give a standing 8 count. And that's what happened with Bowe. Normally, after the second standing 8 count, the referee tends to wave it off anyway. And that's what happened. I think Lennox Lewis caught him with a couple of right hands and left. And it was a second standing 8 count for Bowe, and referee waved it off. Lennox Lewis gold medal the second time trying. Because don't forget, he also tried in 1984. I think he lost to Tyler Biggs in the final. And then obviously in 88 he got gold medal.
So obviously they left the amateur side of boxing with Olympic medals. Of course, you know, they were well spoken about. As you mentioned, Customato spoke highly of Lennox Lewis, and they both went into the professional side of boxing, and you could tell they were destined for greatness. In 1992, both fighters were currently undefeated. You know, Lennox Lewis had just won the Commonwealth title in October off Razor Ruddock, I believe.
Yeah.
And
2 rounds of it, I believe. I think 2 rounds he knocked him out in Razor Ruddock.
And then a few weeks later, Riddick Bowe was about to challenge Evander Holyfield for the undisputed heavyweight title of the world. Now, you mentioned that fight where, you know, Bowe beat Holyfield, that 10th round, how Teddy Atlas will still talk about it till today. In 1992, in the 13th of November 1992, that's when Bowe defeated Holyfield to become the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. And of course, you had Lewis, who had just become the Commonwealth champion, who was on the rise. It made perfect sense for both fighters to get the fight to happen, you know, get the deal over the line, but it didn't. So the WBC had given both fighters till December the 13th to reach an agreement, or the fight would go to purse bids. Now, Frank Newman, who was the manager of Riddick Bowe at the time, made two offers to Lennox Lewis and his team. The first would have guaranteed Lewis $3 million. That meant Riddick Bowe would have had a 90% split of the purse. The second offer was for Lewis to refuse the WBC title fight, have an interim fight in the US, and then fight Bowe for $9 million, or a percentage that would have been negotiated. Frank Maloney at the time rejected both the offers and countered with his own proposal of a 75-25% split. Newman turned it down, and Maloney then had a change of heart, but Newman told him he was too late and that a title defense against another opponent other than Lewis was imminent. Now, looking back at that whole episode where you had Frank Maloney reject both the offers and then have a change of heart, why do you think the reason was that Frank Maloney had rejected them offers?
But first of all, the $3 million offer to Lennox Lewis based on 90-10 split was ridiculous.
But at that time, HF, you know, money wasn't as big in boxing.
No, but
not
it was still
now.
a 90-10 split, though, isn't it? Come on, it can be 90-10 split of 100 million, 10 million, still a lot of money, but come on, 10-90-10. That's injustice to Lennox Lewis. Bear in mind, he beat him as an amateur anyway, so it's not like Lennox Lewis was just a contender coming up and trying to fight Bowe. He was actually rated probably as good or better than Bowe because he had the gold medal anyway. $3 million. The reason why they rejected that was understandably, Frank Maloney said he'll do his fight injustice if he accepted that. He counted with a 25% over 75 to Bowe, which Bowe rejected, and then he got rid of the belt, threw it in the trash can in that video that we've all seen.
Which is a point we'll get onto.
Yeah, and another reason, I mean, he felt like the WBC were like forcing his hand. You have to fight Lennox Lewis now. Purse bids would be 75-25, and he felt like Lennox didn't deserve 25%, so he threw the trash can away, threw the belt away in the trash can.
Now, obviously, we'll move on to that point. You know, on December the 14th, 1992, Riddick Bowe held a press conference in London and said, "If Lewis wants the belt, he has to get it out of the garbage." Bowe then threw the belt in a garbage can. Now, every fighter's dream, obviously, is just, when they start their career, is to become a world champion.
Yeah.
What did you think of Riddick Bowe's actions by him throwing the belt in a trash can? Not just any belt, the WBC belt, which I've always said to you, I think is the most prestigious belt out of the lot.
You can argue for and against his case, because obviously, him throwing away the belt because Lennox Lewis rejected a 10% split was obviously showing that Bowe was more focused on making money. Bowe and his manager Rock Newman, who dictated the play. Their main focus was the money, so they felt like the WBC didn't count for much because the fighters make the belts. He still had the other two, IBF and WBO.
Don't you think, looking back at it at that point, you know, it was dubbed as probably the biggest fight in the heavyweight division at the time, you know, and fight fans wanted to see it, everybody wanted to see it. It really would have, you know, the winner would have cemented his place as the king of the heavyweight division. But don't you think, to go all the way to London and to end up throwing the belt in a trash can is disrespectful, not only to the WBC, but it's also disrespectful to the heavyweight division at the time.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was one of the most bizarrest things that we've ever seen. The fact that he never just relinquished it, but he just threw it in the trash. It's kind of funny at the same time as well.
Bowe said at the point he was relinquishing the title because he didn't want to be intimidated by the sanctioning body to face Lennox Lewis. Now, do you think Bowe losing to Lewis in the amateurs had a part to play in why he wasn't so adamant in making the fight happen? I mean, even though they sent two offers over to Lewis's team.
If you ask him, he would say, obviously not, because that's what fighters are supposed to say. I don't believe he was scared of Lennox Lewis. Of course, he'll play in the back of his mind. I just think his manager Rock Newman felt like Lennox Lewis was too big of a risk at the time because he never had any other fighters to make money off. So Bowe was the only fighter. Lennox Lewis represented too much of a risk, and he wasn't willing to give Lennox Lewis more than 10, 15, 20%.
Well, I think, you know, when you look at it, obviously, you have to realise that the amateurs and the pros is two different ball games. I mean, you know, you had Dillian White who defeated Anthony Joshua in the amateurs, and then, of course, in 2015, Anthony Joshua knocked out Dillian White in the pros. So, could it have played a part that the fact that Riddick Bowe was beaten by Lennox Lewis in the amateurs? Maybe. Or was it the fact that Riddick Bowe thought he was too much of the A side and Lewis was the B side? I think it's more to do with money. 90-10 split is basically saying you don't want to fight, and then relinquishes the title too. I think Bowe was more to blame for the fight not happening than Lennox. But at the time, obviously, I've just mentioned, you know, you had Riddick Bowe, who was the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, and then you had Lennox Lewis, who was the British champion at the time. Do you think if that sort of situation happened right now, that's like me saying to you, we don't have an undisputed champion now, but the closest one to the undisputed champion is Anthony Joshua, and the British champion is Hughie Fury. That's like the WBC ordering Anthony Joshua to fight Hughie Fury. If that fight was to happen,
but Hughie Fury doesn't come with a gold medal, and he didn't beat Joshua in the Olympics for the final for the gold medal. So Lennox Lewis he had a name coming up. He was known. He was predicted by Customer as the next king of heavyweight division. He won the gold medal. He was hyped up. He had all the attributes to be a heavyweight great, which he turned out to be, just without fighting Bowe.
And after obviously this whole incident of Riddick Bowe throwing the belt in the trash can, the WBC had then given the WBC title to Lennox Lewis and then become WBC champion. Just looking back at that HF, do you think it would have made more sense for him to fight for a vacant title rather than just being handed the belt?
Yeah, I was actually surprised that they just gave the title to him. I mean, who does that nowadays?
Yeah.
I don't know who the mandatory was at the time. Number one in the rankings and stuff. Maybe, I don't know. Who did he fight to win the title? I think it was it Tony Tucker?
I
think it was Tony Tucker. He never beat him. He beat him, but it wasn't for a vacant title. He just defended it.
He was the defending champion at the time.
He defended it against Tony Tucker.
And then obviously July 1993, Lewis's management, who obviously was a WBC champion at the time, rejected a deal to fight Riddick Bowe again. Lewis was offered 11 million to Bowe's 21 million. Frank Maloney said the fight won't happen until the summer of 1994. Now, he obviously had Lennox Lewis, who was WBC champion at the time, and he obviously had Riddick Bowe, who was still world champion at the time, just without the WBC title. Now, what could have potentially killed the fight was in October 1993, Riddick Bowe lost a rematch to Evander Holyfield, and then just over a year later, Lennox Lewis lost in September 1994 to Oliver McCall. Do you think, not only did they lose their fights, their O had gone as well. Do you think that could have potentially sort of killed the reputation of the fight, sort of like taken the hype away from it?
The hype and the fight wouldn't be as big as it could have been in 1992, 93. But with both guys losing, surely they could have dropped the egos a little, make a fight, maybe 50-50 split or even 60-40 towards Bowe. Something more reasonable. I mean, with you saying that Lennox Lewis rejected 11 million and with Bowe to receive 21 million, if my maths is right, that's a 65-35 split to Bowe, which is more than the 25% that Frank Maloney said he would accept if offered. So Frank Maloney kind of contradicted himself there. Obviously, this time Lennox Lewis got the WBC, so his worth did increase. But still, I mean, 11 million for Lennox Lewis at the time was big money. So in that sense, for that situation, I think Lennox Lewis was to blame, because Bowe was still a bigger name in America. Fight would have taken place in the US market pay-per-view, which meant Bowe would sell most of the pay-per-views as being an American New Yorker.
And obviously the unfortunate thing was that the fight never happened. Now, it's one that you can sort of like...
It's a shame. It's a darn shame.
It's a massive shame, of course. And it's kind of...
Bowe. I like Lennox.
It's kind of the current problem we've got in today's heavyweight division. Now, credit to Tyson Fury and Deontay Wilder, they've already met, but, they've left sort of the boxing world disappointed as to why the rematch hasn't happened yet. And, of course, you've got Anthony Joshua, who holds the other belts in the division. A fight with him and Deontay Wilder still yet to happen. Now, in thinking about, say, 10, 15 years' time, we don't want to look back and say, well, why didn't we see the rematch between Wilder and Fury, or why didn't we see Wilder take on Anthony Joshua? Why didn't we see Anthony Joshua get in the ring with Tyson Fury? But looking back till this day, HF.
Till this day?
Yes, till this day, of course, which is a catchphrase Deontay Wilder likes to use quite often today. Looking back on it till this day, what do you think would have happened if it did happen?
What's that, Bowe Lewis?
Bowe versus Lewis.
I would probably have to say Lennox Lewis knocked him out. I saw Bowe eat a few right hands by Holyfield in 1992, and Holyfield was not a big puncher at heavyweight, but he hurt Bowe in Bowe's prime. But that fight was Bowe's prime. After that, he was never the same again. So if Holyfield hurt Bowe, imagine what Lennox Lewis would do to him. But then you go around, you can also say the same about Lennox Lewis, who got knocked out by McCall and Hasim Rahman. That if it were Bowe hitting Lennox with those punches, he would also knock him out.
And then you have to obviously look at the fact that what Vitaly Klitschko did to Lennox Lewis. Yes, we all know.
Was like way later, though.
But it still happened. Though we all know, obviously, in the end, Lewis won the fight because it had to be stopped and it went to points. But there was still obviously certain factors in Lewis's game that might have just favoured Riddick Bowe.
Because when Lennox Lewis fought David Tua, he knew David Tua was a massive puncher, so he changed his game plan. His game plan was jab behind jab behind jab. Don't take no risks. He just got a 12-round shutout, and he did the same thing against Mike Tyson, where Manny Stewart famously said, "You got a dead man in front of you, get rid of him, before he catches you with some crazy wild shit and knock you out. Because Tyson was capable, and because he then knew about Lennox Lewis's his chin, which is susceptible to be knocked out, as evidently showed.
So in the end of it all, HF.
Yeah. But if I had to
this.
put my money down, I would have to say Lennox Lewis. In that moment, in 92, 93, I was Lennox late stoppage.
And who do you think is the main reason behind as to why the fight never happened?
Rock Newman, Bowe's manager. He got too greedy. Bowe was his only cash cow, and he never had anything else to fall back on, so he kind of milked him. And turns out in the end, I think like 10 years later, Bowe ended up suing Rock Newman anyway. I can't remember for how much amount, but for I do remember reading something along the lines of Bowe suing him. So it bit him in the ass in the end, and now Bowe's broke. Lennox Lewis is living a multi-millionaire lifestyle in Miami.
Working for Showtime as well.
The Showtime?
Yep, he's doing a bit of
I
work
know
for
he used to
Showtime as well.
commentate for HBO as well. I'm pretty sure he did.
He's worked for Showtime. He's done a lot of work for the
Great,
Wilder
good
Fury
stuff,
build-up.
yeah.
You know, but you know, listen, regardless of whatever Riddick Bowe's financial situation is, you know, a lot of credit has to go to him. Former undisputed heavyweight champion of the world, a silver medalist. You know, he's involved in some great fights, like you mentioned, against Evander Holyfield.
He beat Holyfield twice.
Exactly.
And then obviously after that, he got beaten by the Polish guy. Golota. What's his first name again?
Andrew Golota.
Andrew Golota. He got battered by him twice. By that time, Bowe was
both fights went to no contest.
Bowe was the finish as a fighter anyway at the time. So I don't think
both fights were stopped because Golota was disqualified, wasn't he?
Yeah, hit him in the ball sack way too many times.
Which is something we're seeing quite often in boxing, especially if you watch the Terence Crawford Amir Khan fight. Debatable.
That wasn't as bad though.
We ran a poll on our Instagram page and we asked the question, it never happened, but if it did, who would win, Lewis versus Riddick Bowe? 70% voted Lennox Lewis would win and 30%
I think
Riddick
that's
Bowe
also down to the popularity of Lennox Lewis as opposed to Bowe. But you got to remember Bowe's prime was
when you speak about Lennox Lewis, you know, he's a very iconic figure in boxing. You know, he's a well-known name. Do you think Riddick Bowe is a well-known name in boxing in the UK?
Not in the UK, no, because like I said, his prime lasted like 2 fights. By the time it was 93, 94, he's finished anyway. He retired in 1996. After that, he's come back for a few fights. It was a bit of a shambles, really. But it is a shame because he was up there with the best of that era, alongside Lennox and Holyfield and Tyson. Tyson was in jail at the time when Bowe was king of the ring, which is a shame because Tyson and Bowe would have been a good fight. Both went to the same school, ironically, in New York.
And then we turned the question onto Facebook and we used a boxing page called Boxing Updates, a really, really good Facebook page for boxing banter, you know, just talking about boxing in general, current discussions and topics in boxing. And we asked the question, who would have won, and we come out with some great answers in the end. And we obviously picked the best answers. Helvin George said, it's a pick'em fight. I don't think Bowe clearly lost an amateur's ref made a bad call. Lewis punches harder, though Bowe is resilient and can be relentless once he has hurt an opponent. HF, your answers to that?
Yeah, definitely. I see. Obviously, when he landed that big uppercut against Holyfield in round 10, he went after him until he just gassed himself out, punched himself out. And even against Golota, he knocked him down in, I think the first or second fight, and he went after him. So it's a good finisher.
Another answer we got was from Bruce Douglas. Bowe would have lost because he didn't think he could have won the fight in the first place.
So what? Basically, he's saying that he's scared going into the ring.
Yeah. Probably because of what might have happened.
It's unfair to say that because he was undisputed champ. So I mean, I don't think he was scared. He was, like you said, Rock Newman didn't feel like the fight. The risk was high enough, low enough for the reward.
Well, you've given your opinion on what might have happened. I've read out obviously the Instagram poll, and I've picked a couple of the best comments from the Facebook group called Boxing Updates. My opinion is I reckon Lennox Lewis would have won, and I reckon he would have stopped Riddick Bowe. Strictly because, he had the height advantage over Riddick Bowe. He was more powerful, he was more comfortable behind the jab, and I just think overall he was a better boxer than Riddick Bowe. But, of course, it's like I said earlier on during the podcast, it's one that you could debate all day, and unfortunately it's one of those that we're never going to see. And the reason why we picked this topic to discuss today is because what we're currently getting is we're not getting them big fights in the heavyweight division. And it's as Jim Gray said, we never saw Bowe versus Lewis happen. He said that to Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder said that these fights will happen, but before we round up the podcast, HF, what's got to be done to make these fights happen? who needs to
I
stop?
think Fury and Wilder can make their fights easier because
They made it very easy if you think about
but
it.
you can understand the 50-50 split. You can't say that. You can't give Anthony Joshua does not need to give them guys 50-50 split. The only way he gives it is if he really, really wants to make the fight. But they don't deserve 50-50 against Anthony Joshua. You only have to look at what they earned in the last fight as opposed to what Joshua will earn in his next fight. Ask Deontay Wilder what he made about 15 mil. Joshua's going to make 32 mil. So how can you give 50-50? Fury's the same
Deontay
situation.
Wilder holding the WBC title.
Yeah, and Joshua's got three of them. Doesn't Deontay Wilder want the other three?
Well, I would like to think he does want the other 3 belts. And then
I'm team AJ in this side.
So you believe
it's like Floyd coming back and giving 50-50 to someone else. Floyd doesn't need to give 50-50 to anyone. Even Conor McGregor selling all these pay-per-views in the UFC took a humbling 33% against Floyd because he knew what the fight would generate and he knew how much bigger Floyd is than him. And these guys need to do the same.
how much of a a travesty would it be if we didn't get to see that fight between Wilder and AJ?
It'd be a shame. This guy's the best of the era. We're not fortunate to have the 90s and the 70s era. These guys are good fighters. Maybe in the next 20 years we'll be saying they're great. At the moment they're not.
We're obviously mentioning about the Wilder and AJ fight, but don't you think, business wise and in terms of, the hype of the fight, Fury versus AJ, 90,000 at Wembley in the summer of
yeah, but it'd be bigger in the UK than it is in the US. I think,
which is why I'm saying in Wembley, wouldn't
yeah,
that
but
be more
they lose out a lot of money that they could make in America. DAZN money won't be there. ESPN money, not much of it will be there because the fight will take place in the UK 10 PM. It'll be during the day in the US. I don't think the AJ vs Fury fight, if it happens, I don't think it will happen in the UK.
So you would think it makes more sense to take it over to America?
I think even AJ vs Fury, you have to fight in the US to maximize money, to get the ESPN money, to get the DAZN money. Because the UK guys, box office, we pay for it at 4 in the morning anyway. We're used to that shit. But the US guys, they're not used to paying pay-per-view at 4 in the afternoon. You have to remember to consider these things.
Topics you can discuss all day long, but as a boxing fan, we really, really do want to see them free and get in the ring.
I am the master of economics when it comes to boxing.
Well, that's what you like to think, HF. That's another debatable topic we can discuss all day long. But like I said, listen, we were very fortunate to see Wilder versus Fury. It was a great fight. We want to see it again, but we also want to see Anthony Joshua in the ring with these two. Will it happen? Won't it happen? Only time will tell. We obviously know Tyson Fury fights Thomas Schwartz on June 15th in Las Vegas. And of course, Anthony Joshua defends his world titles against Andy Ruiz June the 1st in Madison Square Garden in New York. But yeah, that's all we've got time for today on the podcast. Just want to thank everyone out there for listening to our podcast. We hope you've enjoyed it. Once again, keep up to date with us on social media. All the links are in our description, and if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. HF, thank you very much for joining. Loved your input, and thank you very much for taking your time out today to give us your opinion on this subject.
Anytime.
I'm Faisal Khan, and thank you once again for watching episode 1 of the Lights Out Boxing Podcast.